give it up for the worship team one time this morning. Hey, real quick, I'll tell you, we are so blessed. And again, what we talked about with Good Friday coming up, but we're blessed on a week-to-week basis. I know that if you haven't went online or wherever you stream your music from, if you haven't went online and got some of After Grace's music, I challenge you to do so. It's really good, and A, they're in our house, and so we ought to support them, but B, it's really fantastic music. They're great songwriters, great musicians, great heart, and we're a little spoiled, and maybe it's because we're a little used to it, that, you know, Cody's up here leading, or Jared's over here playing guitar, or Jared's leading, and Cody's playing drums. We get really kind of spoiled having the gifting that we do up here on the stage with After Grace, but I challenge you, go out, find their music on Spotify, on Apple Music, anywhere that you get your music, but go find it and download it. You'll be glad that you did. There's some fantastic stuff out there, and so I challenge you to do that. So, guys, Matthew chapter 14 is where we're going to be. I want to dive into today. I know Pastor Aaron did a great job last week talking about this idea of a hand up rather than a hand out, and so there's some pre-work that has to be done before you and I can offer a hand out or a hand up, and that has to be done in us. Next week, I also want to share with you, we're going to kick off a brand new series next week called Church in the Wild. And this is going to be on evangelism and sharing the gospel. And I challenge you, if you have people, listen real closely to what I'm about to say, because this is a very specific group. How many of you know people that grew up in church or have been in church, but are currently no longer in church because they feel like they've been hurt by the church? Bring them next week. Okay? Church hurt, de-churched, however you want to say it, is a real thing. And it's typically not, most people don't have a problem with Jesus. Like, we're all down with Jesus. That guy's good stuff, right? We love him. We believe he is who he says he is. Most people don't struggle with Jesus, but they struggle with the church. And for good reason. For a lot of years and even still now, there's churches that mess it up. I'll be the first to tell you that Real Life Church does not get it perfect. But where that comes from is the element of humanity. It's people that mess up church. The problem is, it's people that also make up the church. And so here we are, where we need people, but yet people keep getting in the way. And so what do? Well, we walk through it. We go back to the basics of what it is God called us to do as the church. And so next week we're going to dive into that called Church in the Wild. We're going to continue to be in the book of Matthew. I'm not going to tell you which chapter, so be watching for that this week, because I may jump online for a little bit and share with you where we're heading, because this is going to be so good about being sent and what that means for the local church, but also those that have left the local church and said, I can just do this from a deer stand. You can't. You can't. My church is sitting in my living room with my family. No, it's not. You can be the church there, but you can't have church there. It's different. And it's different on purpose. And so we're going to dive into that next week. So bring some folks with you, invite them, bribe them, pay for their lunch, whatever you got to do. Get them to come with you. There's a seat next to you that's empty, so get them to come with you and hang out with you. Matthew chapter 14 is where we're going to be today, though. Very familiar story. Most people, as soon as I get started in this, you're going to understand where we're heading, and that's okay. It's what we would call an epic story of the Bible. You guys know epic stories of the Bible, right? Somebody give me an epic story of the Bible. Samson and Delilah. Jonah, somebody said Jonah. What's another epic story of the Bible? Daniel and the lion's den, David and Goliath. Listen to you Old Testament scholars. Anybody got a New Testament epic story other than the resurrection of Jesus Christ? Wait, what? Lazarus being raised from the dead. That's a good one. The Good Samaritan's a fantastic one. Stories of Jesus in there. Well, we're going to be in a New Testament epic story of the Bible, all right? But in chapter 14 of the book of Matthew, you have some epic thing happens throughout this chapter. We see Jesus healing people. Then we see this moment where Jesus sits down on a hillside and the crowd's gathered, and there are about 5,000 men there, and the disciples come to Jesus and they whisper in his ear and they're like, hey, Jesus, they're all getting hungry. So I think we should send them back to town, let them get some food, kind of an intermission, then we'll come back and you can finish the sermon. How about that? Can you imagine if I preached so long, Chris, and somebody came up and like, Pastor Vince, They're going to want to eat. We've got to shut it down. Let them eat, they can come back. They'll come back. I mean, some of them will come back. You got to be fine. That's what the disciples are doing to Jesus. And Jesus just looks at him, he's like, hey, feed them. What? Feed them. Go ahead and just feed them. That way they don't have to leave. Feed them what? What do we have? I find this so interesting in this story. Maybe the Bible is just awesome to me. But in 5,000 men, plus women and children, all they can find is one boy's sack lunch. Ladies in the house, let's talk for a moment. Women with children or grandchildren. How many of you are going to plan a day trip and not take a snack? That's what I thought. I don't think momming has changed much since the beginning of time. And so I'm sitting here going, what mom was like, I ain't giving you my food. It's for my kids. And then the one kid whose mom wasn't there, who sent her son with a lunch sack, he's like, you can have mine. And the bread and the fish were there, and he takes that, and obviously you know the rest of the story. He blesses it, the food passes through Jesus' hands, and then it multiplies. It's a great giving principle right there, that which God has given you won't be blessed until you allow it to pass through the hands of Christ. It has to pass through his hands, and then it multiplies. That's how it works. And so we see Jesus practice this principle with the people. It multiplies the young boy's lunch, so much so that they take up 12 baskets of leftovers after they feed everybody on the hillside. And then Jesus is gassed. He's done. He's peopled out. I can understand 15, 20,000 people plus the disciples whispering in your ear that you need to shut it down. You know, he's tired. So he tells the disciples, he says, hey guys, here's what I want you to do. Go ahead and get in the boat. Going across the sea. What he meant by sea was a lake. The Sea of Galilee is about 14 miles wide at its widest point. And we don't know that that's where they crossed. But he said, go ahead and cross to the other side. We got to get away from the crowd. But before I get away with you from the crowd, I got to get away from you for a minute. And the Bible says that he separates himself and he goes up into the mountain to pray. Jesus did this often. He did this often where he kind of just pulls away from everything and goes. Sometimes when you guys, when we're blessed to have either Pastor Aaron or Pastor Brandon speak, sometimes that's me. I love you guys, and I love what I get to do, but sometimes I have to pull away and just take a breather and get a breath. And so Jesus takes this breather, gets pulled away, goes to the mountain to pray. The disciples leave, they get on the boat, they're on the Sea of Galilee. As they're crossing over to the other side, the Sea of Galilee is synonymous with pop-up storms. It's because of where it sits in this valley. The winds that come off the ocean there, the Indian Ocean, is where the winds come off of. They just funnel in through these mountains and hit the sea. And so it's like, hey, everything looks. How many of you been on the lake where this has happened here? Where you just been out on the lake, got a kid on the tube, and all of a sudden lightning strikes the water? Like, yeah, awesome. Okay. You pull the burnt rope back into the boat. That's always a good day. But we've seen these pop-up storms happen before. They're just on you. And that's what happened out here. The storm is just on them. And the waves are crashing. The winds are tumultuous. And we see the disciples are starting to freak out a little bit. And then that's where we're going to pick up the story. Because in this story of Peter and the disciples and Jesus walking on the sea, I want to give you 3 principles that you can write down before I actually get into the body of the sermon. All right? The Bible said that they were in the midst of the sea and that the storm was raging and all this was happening, and Jesus came to them walking on the sea. That's the intro. That they had went across and Jesus come to them walking on the sea. First principle I want you to get is regardless of your circumstance or regardless of your situation, Jesus knows where you are. How many of you that's comforting? How many of you it's convicting? Jesus knows where you are. He knows your situation. He knows your circumstance. There are so many times in my own life where I say, God, I don't know that you understand. And I think he laughs at me from heaven. I don't think it's a big laugh. I think it's just a chuckle because he knows me. And he goes, Vince, I know exactly where you are. I didn't wake up surprised. I know some people are like, God, how could you let my marriage do this? Guess what? He didn't wake up surprised that your marriage is a wreck. He didn't wake up surprised that your kids are acting the way they're acting, or that you're acting the way you're acting. He didn't wake up surprised that you have financial trouble. He didn't like heaven is not shocked by the things that shock you and I. And it's so comforting to me to know that God, He knows where I'm at. The second comforting thing is that God not only knows where I'm at, but He knows exactly what to do with me where I'm at. I love the fact that God gives me steps in my life. These are things that you need to be writing down, because here's the thing that I know for sure is going to happen. There is going to be a storm that hits you. Any of you ever been through one in your own life where you didn't see it coming? Where it just you don't know what's happening, you don't know where to turn. I've been in situations in my life I don't even know what to say next, much less what to do. What do you think about that, Vince? I don't know. I don't know what to say to that. There are times people come to me and they're like, Pastor Vince, I need your help with this. And I go, well, you can tell me. What do you think I should do? I don't know. I don't know. I can't help in that. I can pray with you and pray for you and walk beside you and not let you stumble as best I can. But I don't know what to do sometimes. And then in my own kids' lives or my marriage or family or job or whatever it is, you go, I don't know what to do here. Thank God we serve a God that not only knows where we are, but what to do with us where we are. That I can, if I take, He's going to give me a step. Proverbs tells me He's going to be the light into my path. If this is a path that's been worked out, God's going to put light on it so I know where to step in it. It tells me He's going to guide my way when there's not a path and I don't know what to do. He's going to make a way for me. He's going to give me a door when I need a door. He's going to show me the window to crawl through if that's what I need to do. God's not going to leave me hanging in my circumstance or my situation. He's going to give me the next step. God knows where I am. God knows what to do with me. Third thing I want you to grasp before I get into the actual sermon is this. You're not the only one in the storm. Look at the person next to you and say, I'm praying for you. Well, now you're committed. Okay? You better not pray for them. All right? Pray for them. Because guess what? They may be walking through something right now that would completely rock your world. That would stagger you. And they're holding it together. They showed up today, same reason you did, looking for hope, looking for help, an answer, relief, something. And I think as believers, sometimes we can get really caught up in our storm, forgetting that other people are walking through them. Forgetting that the person next to us is walking through a storm too. Forgetting perspective other than our own exists and it's out there. And so as you pray through today, because here's the deal, as I said, storms are going to come. Storms are going to show up. Now, how many of you are cellar people? Like when there's a storm, you head to the cellar. Okay, not many in this service. Bunch of rednecks in this one. Good. How many of you are front porch people when the storm comes? Yes, these are my people. Yeah, that's me. A few years ago, Jennifer and I lived in Gassville when the tornado hit Gassville. And I'm standing out in the front yard, like literally as red, hands on my hips, just looking around. I was like, babe! She's getting kids wrangled and everything else. And I'm like, hey! She's screaming at me, what? I said, look! This part of the sky is going that way. But that part of the sky is going that way. I've never seen that before. I'm just watching it literally, and she's like, look! And I went just like this and looked across the yard and to the next block. And every tree on the next block was sideways as the tornado was coming through that portion of our block. So I immediately responded and ran into the house where she had already wrangled 4 of our kids. We had 5 at the time, just one hadn't been born yet. So she was holding Caleb internally and holding Parker. He was in his high chair eating. So she jerks Parker out of his high chair, and her and 4 kids pile in the bathtub. Braden is holding on to the bathtub spigot. Kaylee is next to Braden. Vanessa is holding both Kaylee and Braden as the oldest child. And Jay is holding Parker and Caleb, who's there. And I am holding the door to our little bathroom. How many of you have ever been in a tornado? How many of you know holding the door is pointless? Yeah. Yeah, I'm holding the door, and it is beating me to death. I'm trying to hold the door, and my toilet's exploding, sucking and exploding and sucking and exploding. And I hear the windows in our house all explode inward. I hear our neighbor's garage roll through my backyard. I'm praying, man. I'm like, God, why have you forsaken me? No, I didn't do that. But how many of you have been there, right? I'm praying, God, help, get me out. Lord, make it stop. God, make it stop. God, help it stop. Whatever. Lord, you just make this storm stop. Because there's a storm. And I just wanted it to stop. God, please, God, make it stop. Anything. I'll do anything. I'll go to Africa. No, I'm not going to go to Africa. But God, whatever you want me to do. And I hear, it's as if God and I don't know if this ever happened to you, but it's just as if God silenced everything around me except the one thing I needed to hear. And I hear Braden. He's holding on to that faucet, death gripping it. He's about 5 at the time. He's going, God, help me in the storm. 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 It's the only thing he says over and over again. Help me in the storm. Help me in the storm. And in that moment, I was convicted. And the door is smacking me in the arm and the head. And I, in the midst of a tornado, I had to repent before God and say, God, I'm sorry. I'm praying for all this to go away. And a 5-year-old is just trusting you to get him through it. Sometimes in your life, you're going to pray that the storm will just go away. You're going to pray that. You're going to wish more than anything that that's what would happen. Lord, just take the storm away. More times than not, there's a lesson for you in it that you need to be watching for. And so today we're going to talk about the storm, how to ride it out, how to function in the storm. And we see Peter do a pretty good job of it for a while, and then you know what happens. If you don't know what happens, Matthew chapter 14. It's a great book, great chapter, and we're going to read some of it right now. So the first couple things I want to share with you as we walk through the storm. Since storms are going to come, they're going to show up, financial, relational, marital, kids, all of it. They're going to happen. You're going to wake up tomorrow, and God forbid it be anything tragic or traumatizing, but something's going to blindside you. You're not going to see it coming, and it's going to happen. And so what do you do in that moment? What do most of us do in that moment is not always healthy. So what do we do in a healthy way, in a biblical way, what the Word teaches us in that moment? And so here we go, picking up Matthew chapter 14, starting in verse 27. The first thing I want you to get is this: don't let the storms rule your emotions. Somebody say amen. Anybody emotional in the house? Like big emotions? Like you're a crier? Yeah? It's so funny, I said anybody emotional and half the hands went up, and then I said crier, and other people were like, well, yeah, that's me. I'm a sensitive guy. I'm an emotional guy. It's my wiring, and I'm okay with it. I mean, if I see a sad commercial, I'm going to cry. Okay? TV shows, I'm going to cry. I get invested in books. I get invested in lyrics to songs. Not so much I like songs that have rhythm and things like that, but I like the stories that songs tell. Okay? Random stuff, just like, I set fire to the rain. I don't get it. I don't understand the story. And like I said, she can sing the snot out of it, but I don't get it. And so, there's some stuff so I like stories, but so I'm really sensitive that way. And so I cry a lot, and so sometimes my emotions get any of you ever said anything out of emotions that you wish you could take back? Good or bad? Some of you are like, yeah, man, there was this time we got in a fight. No, I'm talking about even the good stuff. You ever tell somebody you love them, and you're like, wait a minute. Some of you are like, I said I do, and I probably shouldn't have. That's a different sermon. We're not going to go there, all right? But if we get in trouble with our emotions, we do it to our kids. Parents, you're emotional. Your kid frustrates you, gets you all bent out of shape. You confuse the snot out of your kid by being like, get over here, sit down. Your kid's doing this because they don't know they're supposed to sit down or get over there. How many of you know what I'm talking about? If you don't, I will smack your teeth out. You don't have to answer this honestly, but I just got to ask. Have any of you ever actually smacked a tooth out? Okay. Now some of you are being really quiet, and you need to pray if you have. I can remember my dad say, he'd give me, when I get home, I'm going to get you. I'm like, I don't know. I think I know what that means. And I don't want to be got. Any of you ever get told to go get your own switch? That is the best kind of torture, right? I know this one's going online, so I'm going to pay for that. But still, how many of you came back with a switch that you couldn't do anything with when you were asked that? You're like, here you go. Just do your best. It only took once, right? If you did that, you only did it one time. Then the rest, you come back like dragging the tree, like, here you go. Just use this. I deserve it. Emotions are incredible. God built us with them. They're fantastic. Emotions are what make you look at your spouse like, man, look at her. I got the best. It's all from this emotion of love and joy and all these things that God put in us to see the great things, but also in how to respond when we see evil or and those things that fire us up, and there's this righteous indignation and frustration with the brokenness around us. That's emotions that God gives us. But man, we have train wrecked it. Like we get emotional about everything. People are like, and this is a new teaching today, a lot of times you see this in parenting, we're like, no, you should just let your kids have their emotions. Parents, you have a job given to you by the Creator to direct and to lead your children. Direct and lead them. You can't allow the emotions to lead, because every one of you just admitted to emotions getting the best of you from time to time. You can let your kids feel. That's okay. But make sure you direct once it happens. It's not just a free-for-all. It's not how that works, not how it's intended to work, not how the gospel teaches us, the Bible teaches us to raise our children. So we have to be careful with emotions. But here in the storm, notice Jesus is very quick with his words because he knows they're humans on the boat. The Bible says that he came walking to them on the... Are you already out here? Whew, I got to hurry. Listen, that's why they come out when they do. Some of y'all think there's a cue. There's not. It's the clock. So I'll shut up in the right amount of time. So I got 80% of a sermon to squeeze into the next 10 minutes. So y'all stay with me, all right? So here we see Jesus walking on the sea, and he comes out, and the Bible says pretty quickly that they look at him, and they're like, what is that? What is that coming across the sea? So Jesus says, hey, take heart. It's me. Don't be afraid. You notice what he gives them first? He's saying, take hold of your heart, where our emotions come out of. He says, hey, get a grip. It's me. He gives them the fact of the moment. You know when our emotions usually train wreck us? Is when we allow the emotion to overwhelm the facts in a situation. We start believing what we don't know to be real over what we know to be real. So Jesus sets the foundation. He says, get a hold of your heart right here. Understand the fact that it's me coming to you. And then what's he say? Don't be afraid. If you know it's me, fear shouldn't be in the equation. If you know it's me, the emotion shouldn't be taking over. You have the fact that it's Jesus coming to you. And so, folks, when you're in the midst of your storm, when you're in the midst of walking through whatever it is that's going to blindside you this week, this year, this month, whatever it happens, take heart. It's me, it's God, it's Jesus. I'm coming to you in the midst of your storm. How does he know? Because he knows where you are and he knows what to do with you. Take heart, it's me. When you allow fear and emotion to come in, we do some silly stuff. We will say things to our spouse that we don't mean on any level at any point in time. But because our mouth and our heart overflows, we can't stop it. So we say hurtful things. You see fear trap people. They say this about people that get lost. Typically, they find them far deeper in the lost state than they would have been if they'd have just stopped. But because fear takes over, they begin to run. And that flight takes over. And they run deeper into the places where they've been or where they're at. And so when this happens, the same thing happens to us as believers. And we go, wait, I don't know what to do in this moment. So God, since I don't know what to do, I'm going to do whatever feels right. And we run off instead of taking heart. Recognizing that Jesus knows where we are. We don't have to be afraid. Second thing is this, is that in your storm, you're going to be challenged. This is what happened to me when I heard my 5-year-old praying behind me. You're going to be challenged in the storm. God doesn't have you, you're not walking through a storm on accident. God's not just trying to see how strong you are. It's not how he functions. To everything under heaven, there is a purpose, Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Every storm you walk through, there is a lesson, there is a something to be gained from it. And so he's saying, don't lose focus of me. Make sure that you accept the challenge. I love Peter. Everybody loves Peter. There's theologians that call Peter the disciple with the foot-shaped mouth. Because Peter constantly was the guy that was like, here, hold this. And he would step into stuff. And so Peter is that guy here. There's 12 guys on the boat. The disciples are all on the boat. And Peter's on the edge of the boat. And Jesus says, take heart. It's me. Don't be afraid. Peter looks around and says, if it's you, tell me to come out there with you. Any of y'all ever draw a line in the sand hoping the other person doesn't step across the line in the sand? Sometimes I think that's where Peter was in this moment. I think he was like, watch, fellas. Jesus, if that's you, you tell me to come out. Peter, come on out. Dang it. Okay. You have to understand this, guys. As much as I hear people, and I've heard Christians my whole life be like, Jesus called me out on the water, I'd step out in the water. You're a liar. Because you know how I know? Because Jesus isn't out in front of you anymore. He's within you, and you still won't do what he's telling you to do. Everybody wants to walk on water. But witness to my coworker, it's not my personality type. I'm introverted, so I can't talk to people. No, stop it. Water walking isn't natural. It's the same faith it would take for me to step off this platform right now. Like, it makes that much sense. How many of you know that if I wasn't watching or prepared and I just stepped off this platform, I would bust my face about right where you're standing or sitting? That's what would happen. Peter steps out onto the water as if it's a floor. Now, I don't know if he was like, come on, how many of you be that way? I love Jesus as much as the rest of you, but I'm going, okay, we're good. Peter steps out on it and walks towards Jesus. He took that challenge in the storm. Lord, if it's you, I'm coming out. Come on out. All right, I'm coming. He steps out of the boat. Everybody gives the disciples grief. Yeah, those other 11 guys, they didn't walk on the water. We wouldn't have walked on the water either. It's just real. As much as I want to say, you bet I would have. I'm a soldier of the cross. I'd just stepped out on that water. I'm just being honest with you. There's a part of that that's just absolutely terrifying to me. To just trust and step. So we see Peter walking on the water. God, he accepted the challenge in the storm. Here's another thing the storm does. Storm will mess with your focus. See, I was missing the storm. When I was standing out in the yard looking at the sky, I was missing the storm. I was seeing some effects. I was seeing the clouds and things, but I was missing the storm across the street. The one that was blowing houses over and causing transformers to explode. And I was missing all of that, which is odd, right? Because that should have been the most obvious thing. But I got caught up looking at the sky. Same thing happened to Peter. Here's Peter walking on the water towards Jesus. He's walking on the water towards Christ, who's walking towards him, which is a New Testament picture of the scripture that says, if you draw nigh unto God, he will draw nigh unto you. Here it is actually happening. Peter's drawing close to Jesus. Jesus is drawing close to Peter. And all of a sudden, this thing happens around verse 29. We see this happen where Peter's walking on the water. And as he starts to look around, or verse 30, but when he saw the wind, he was afraid. Beginning to sink. You notice when he began to sink? It didn't say it was when he saw the wind. It says it after he said he was afraid. That's when he began to sink. And I love this picture because literally, if you are standing on water and it all of a sudden decides not to hold you up, how quickly are you under the water? Immediately, right? Like you're not on the water and you're in the water then. But here we see something different happen, and I think it's a picture of what happens with our faith. We see Peter begin to sink in the water. Not just drop in the water, he begins to sink in the water because his faith in who he's watching hasn't been destroyed. It's not gone. He's just distracted. And when he started noticing something other than Christ, the further that got away from him. See, here's the thing. Hey, Eric, I'm going to step down right here, buddy, okay? I have a Brinley. She's 5. And if I had Brinley standing right here on this stage, and I said, hey, B, come here to Dad. And I was standing right here. Guess what she'd do? She'd jump. Without questioning it, without fear, without confusion, she'd step right off, man. The problem is, if I was standing here and I said, Brinley, jump to me, how many of you know what she would do? Some of you are like, she'd jump. She might. But she'd do this right here first. Look around. Because her faith would be dependent on the distance between that which was catching her and the stuff in between. It's a beautiful picture that we all understand with our kids because we've all done that with our kids. Come here. Man, when they're little, they'll jump off anything right into your arms. Because you know why? You're not going to drop them. If you have to lay down in the dirt and let them step on your face, you're not going to drop them. Am I right? You know the problem with your faith? Is that you've just allowed too much distance between you and God. And you're seeing all the stuff in the middle. See, it didn't say that Peter had got to Jesus yet. It said that he was walking towards him when he saw the wind. So there was still distance. I saw the wind. And he starts to sink. And immediately he cries out to, Lord, save me. I love this image because we don't know how far Jesus was away from Peter. The Bible doesn't tell us that. I don't know how far. They were on their way to the other side of the lake when Jesus came walking to them on the sea. This is a 14-mile wide lake. They could have been in a place where you didn't see land on either side. And here comes Jesus strolling out there on the sea to them. And I don't know how far Peter was away from Jesus when he stopped believing. But it didn't matter how far he was. The moment he called, he cried out. The next verse tells us, and immediately, Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying, Peter, why did you doubt? Why did you doubt? You were just walking on the water. He picks him up. And my favorite part of this, in verse 31, and when they got into the boat, verse 32, when they got into the boat, you know why that's my favorite part? Because we don't know how long it took Peter and Jesus to walk together on the water back to the boat. I don't know how far Peter got away from the boat before he sank. I still don't know how far away Jesus was from him. But afterwards, even though Peter stumbled, even though Peter fell, even though his faith was shaken a little bit, there was something in Jesus that said, we're not done water walking. I'm just going to do it with you for a while. He could have immediately scooped him up and they'd been on the boat. We see him do that with Philip in the New Testament in the book of Acts. He immediately could have just thought it and they'd have been back on land, him and Peter, cooking a fish. No, he said, no. Where your faith struggled, we're going to work through it. Where you slipped in the storm, storm's not over, Peter. We're going to walk through this sucker together. I'm going to teach you something in the storm. I'm not going to make the storm quit while we're out here walking in it. No, the Bible says actually when they got into the boat, the storm ceased. Why didn't God just stop the storm? Because Peter wouldn't have learned anything about walking through a storm. He'd have just assumed that when Jesus showed up, everything was going to be nice and clear water, clear sailing, and it's going to be easy. No, Jesus said, no, Peter, we're going to walk through the storm a little bit. But you're not going to be alone. You're going to learn to have faith. You're going to learn not to doubt that when you cry out to me, I'm there. Some of you right now have been walking through storms, and the one thing you've lacked is truly crying out to Jesus and going, Lord, I don't know what to do. God, I don't know where to turn. I've tried to fix it. I've tried to make it my own way, but I can't do anything else. And I'm sinking right now. You don't need to sink. Church, bow.